This is my review of the Byrds album Fifth Dimension. It was released in 1966 and produced by Alan Stanton. So this was my first Byrds album after the Greatest Hits album. I got this CD version first, and then I got this record like a year or two ago. So this album's kind of always had like a special place for me since it's my first Byrds album, but it's never really been my favorite. That said, I've always really liked it. This album kind of has a lot of changes start for the band at this point. So Gene Clark, who is the main songwriter in the first two albums, leaves the band over, I think, kind of like a combination of like he was having some problems with the other band members because of some like jealousy over him making a lot of money for being the guy writing the songs. And then he had kind of a fear of flying, and he had to get off a plane at some point and like couldn't fly to go on their tour or whatever. So I think that was kind of the big reason why he quit, or like when he quit. But anyway, he quits, but he's still kind of here for some parts of this album. Like he did 8 Miles High before he left, which I think he kind of mainly wrote that song, I think, with some help from McGuinn and Crosby. And he's on like a couple of the other songs. So yeah, Gene Clark leaving, huge deal. Because obviously he wrote a ton of their songs, and it changes their sound like vocally a little bit. I'm not sure if Hillman starts like singing on this album, but he would always step up and take like the place of the third voice eventually with Clark leaving, and so that like changes them their sound a bit. And then you have the producer change, going from Terry Melcher to Alan Stanton. I think Terry Melcher was fired because I believe Jim Dixon, the band's manager, wanted to produce, and I think Crosby at least didn't like Melcher. I don't know how like the rest of the band felt about him. I assume McGuinn liked him because he worked with him later on. But I guess Columbia like had to have somebody like who worked for them produce them or something, so they went to this guy Alan Stanton. This is the only album he did with them. I really it does really sound different, like production-wise, than the first two in some ways, because like he's used some orchestration on some of the tracks here, which is kind of a cool thing. But I also kind of heard that he was more of like a label guy than a producer, really. So the sound for this might be more the engineer. I'm not really sure. But from what I've read, it kind of sounds like he was more of like a labeled guy than an actual like producer like Melcher was. The album opens with Fifth Dimension, the title track, and I've always really loved this song. It's written by McGuinn, and his 12-string guitar on it. It's really cool sounding. I think his vocal's really good. Whole band sounds really good on it. I really like Hillman's bass playing on this song, and really on the whole album. For some reason, Hillman's bass kind of stands out a little bit more than it does on the other two albums. Which, I mean, it's good on the other two albums. I would definitely on Turn there's some songs where it stands out, but just for some reason there's a lot of points on this album where I'm just like hearing the bass and I'm like, that's cool. It's also got some cool organ on it from Van Dyke Parks, which kind of like in the outro of the song is really cool because you just get that organ and the guitar like going together, and it just it sounds really cool. So great opening track and great title track. Second song, Wild Mountain Time, is like a traditional cover, and this is one of the ones where they bring in the orchestration. I think it just sounds really cool with the band sounds, like you add like that orchestration to the harmonies and to the cool 12-string guitar, and it just creates like this really cool sound. So I really like that song. Third track, Mr. Spaceman, song by McGuinn. This one's kind of like a simpler kind of song, kind of funny, with its lyrics about having the spaceman take him along for a ride. I like it. I really like his solo. Anytime he plays a jangly solo, I really like that. But it's kind of a track that I've heard so much, I'm a little bit tired of it because, especially since it's such kind of a short, simple song. So I'm a little bit bored with that one, but not a bad track by any means, really. Next is I See You. At least I kind of messed up when I was writing these songs down. Like I skipped a few and then had to like go back. So yeah, fourth is I See You. This one's by McGuinn and Crosby. It's kind of a weird song. Kind of took me a little bit to get into this and a few of the other tracks on here where they're getting into the more like psychedelic type stuff. It's got some like really weird guitar on it, but I enjoy it. The more I listen to it, kind of the catchier it gets, and I just love the weird like psychedelic guitar stuff that McGuinn's doing on this album. The fifth track, "What's Happening" by Crosby. Another kind of weird, trippy song. I do have to say that, like, of the original Byrds songwriters of like Clark, McGuinn, Crosby, and Hillman, of those four writers, because like Michael Clark doesn't really write as much, but of those four guys, Crosby as a songwriter is probably my least favorite. And I haven't really gotten into his solo stuff a whole lot yet, or even really into like as much Crosby, Stills and Nash as I should have. But he just always kind of seems to write songs to me that aren't as catchy, which I like catchy songs. So he's always kind of been my least favorite as far as songwriters go, and at least in the original lineup of the band. But I do really like this track. I think that's really cool. He has a really good vocal on it, and I love how the guitar kind of like answers his like question. Like he's like, what's happening, and I don't know what's going on and stuff. And then McGuinn kind of comes in with these weird like answers, and the guitars are just so cool on that. So the sixth track, "I Come and Stand at Every Door," is it's like them doing I think they set music to a poem about a ghost from the bombing of Hiroshima. So it's a really dark, depressing song that just kind of like comes out of nowhere. Like easily, I think the darkest thing that they ever recorded. And I don't know, it's a really sad song. I think McGuinn gives a really like moving vocal on it. It fits like, this album's weird. To me, even though it's kind of an album that's all over the place, something about it just like it really runs well together for me. Even though it's all over the place, like I just think it's a really like well put together album in some ways. And I think it like all the songs sound kind of similar in the way they're recorded and stuff. Maybe that's why it sounds cohesive to me, even though it's all over the place. But yeah, even though this song kind of comes out of nowhere with this really depressing, really depressing lyrically song, and really kind of, it is weird like musically what they're doing with it too, kind of compared to the other stuff on the album. But it's still like the album's really cohesive, kind of in spite of that. In my opinion, at least, probably nobody else is going to agree with that. But yeah, really just depressing song. So the seventh track, 8 Miles High, by Clark, McGuinn, and Crosby. And I mean, this was the reason why I got this album first, because this was my favorite song off the greatest hits. It's not probably my favorite Byrds song. Well, I don't know, honestly. It's a great song. This is the song if somebody was like, play a Byrds song, this is like what I would play, because their two biggest hits are covers. Not that that's a bad thing, but if somebody was like, what were the Byrds like as writers or whatever, what was like their thing, I would play this song. But yeah, just a classic, probably my favorite on the album, even though I really love Fifth Dimension. Love the crazy Coltrane influence, like guitar stuff that the McGuinn's doing, and just everything about the song. Like even if it wasn't trippy and like didn't have all the crazy experimental guitar and stuff in it, I would still like it just as much, because I just love like the way. Like I honestly don't even know what the chords are of the song, because I've never like bothered to look it up or anything. But I love the way it kind of like moves. Like the song just seems to have this kind of like movement to it that's just really cool. I really like the drums on it too from Michael Clark. So the eighth track, "Hey Joe," kind of a weird cover that I think Crosby was the one that like insisted on doing it. I like it. I like the Hendrix version more, but it's an interesting kind of way. Like they do it in this almost like punky, kind of chaotic sounding, sloppy way. Gwen has all these weird, like, just weird sounding guitar parts going on throughout it that sound really cool, and they got some cowbell going on that's cool. So it's a fun cover. Then ninth you have Captain Soul, the instrumental of the album, and apparently Michael Clark, the drummer, was like the big driving force behind this one. It's one of the ones with Gene Clark, I guess, with him playing some harmonica. It's not like, it's not something that I go out of my way to listen to on its own, really. But as far as like its place in the album, I think it fits in really well, and I enjoy it every time. Like I listen to the album, it's not something I want to skip. I just think it fits in well with the flow of the album, and it's interesting. Like it's not like the most exciting instrumental ever, but it's fun. Then the ninth track, or wait, I messed up my numbering. The 10th track, you have John Riley, another traditional cover. This is another one where they bring in the orchestration, and once again, I think it sounds really cool. With just like the way the band sounds, adding the orchestration to them. I kind of wish they had done that more after this album, but yeah, it's a cool song for like being a traditional thing. I think it's really catchy. Just the way all the orchestration works with the instruments sound really cool. I like the vocals a lot. And then next song, the 10th track, 242 Foxtrot, the Learjet song by McGuinn. Kind of continuing their thing of ending the albums on something kind of goofy, even though from what I understand, they took this song really seriously. But it's kind of just like a goofy throwaway bit. I mean, it's not, I think it's the weakest thing on here by far, but I don't know, it kind of fits as the album closer. I mean, if I was gonna like have to replace it with one of the bonus, or like I could pick a bonus track to replace it with if I wanted to. But honestly, for me, this song, like ending this album and being like the weakest part of this album, I still think I like a little bit more than what I thought were the weakest points of the two previous albums. So I'd probably just like leave it there. I don't know. I think that this album, just the way it fits together and the way it flows, even though it's so like all over the place, is just like perfect. So like I don't think I would like change almost anything about this album. Yeah, kind of a weird closer. It's got jet engine sounds on it that they recorded, and I think we're like really proud of because they got mad that people thought it was a vacuum cleaner. So that's kind of funny. Then the CD version of this at least has some bonus tracks. It has Why, which is a McGuinn Crosby song and a single that they released. There's actually two versions of that on here. I like the single version the best, which I think is my favorite version of the song because this song actually pops up again on the next album, so we'll talk about it more there. Then it has I Know My Rider, which is a fun, catchy song. I think it's like a traditional song, and like if I had to make a change and like take off what I think is the weakest track on this album and replace it with a bonus track, I would probably put this in the place of their Jet song. Because it's a nice little catchy song. The 14th track, Psychodrama City, is a David Crosby song. And it's interesting. It's not like my favorite. I don't go back to it a whole lot because it's not like really catchy or anything. The vocals don't start until like a minute something into it. So I always end up thinking that, like, I don't listen to it that much, so I always forget that it even has vocals. Like I'll start out listening to it and I'll be like, oh, this is an instrumental. And then they come in like a minute 40 or something like that. So yeah, not my favorite thing on here, but it's interesting. And then there are two alternate takes of, there's an alternate take of 8 Miles High and an alternate take of Why. I believe the alternate take of 8 Miles High the band actually liked better than the version that got onto the album because they thought it was like more spontaneous or something. But they recorded or recorded it in a studio that didn't belong to Columbia, so they weren't allowed to put it on the album. But for me, like, it doesn't. I just got into like hearing the album version of the song, so it kind of like can't replace that for me. Even though I kind of get what they're talking about with when they say that it was more like spontaneous and stuff. I feel like it's kind of a more spontaneous, more like gritty version. And then it ends with an instrumental version of John Riley, which sounds like nothing like the version that got on the album because it doesn't have the orchestration and stuff. So Fifth Dimension, it's, I don't know, I feel like it's definitely a transitional album for them because they've lost Gene Clark, so the rest of them are kind of learning how to fill that place. They have no Dylan covers for the first time on an album, but they do have covers. They kind of replace the Dylan stuff with traditional music. So, and then it's the only album of theirs produced by Alan Stanton. So it's got like the orchestrational thing, which is kind of different in the way that it's like presented on here. So I don't know, definitely a very unique transitional album for them. I have a really like soft place for this album and really like love all of it. It's not my favorite of their albums, and I can understand why. I'm pretty sure a lot of people consider this one of their weaker albums of the original lineup, and I can understand that because it is all a little bit all over the place, and has some tracks that are probably lesser, I guess, in comparison than some of the stuff on some of the other albums. But I just really like the direction they went in here with the psychedelic music and stuff. I believe this is like one of the earliest examples of psychedelic stuff, which I love psychedelic rock, so I've always really liked that. And I mean, it's got a great cover. This is probably one of my favorite covers of theirs, of the way they have the name Byrds written there. So yeah, just a really strong album all the way through, but I can see why some people might not be the biggest fan of it. If you're not into the crazy, trippy guitars, it's not going to be your thing. But I would probably listen to this one after listening to the first two, just because it's like so different of a sound for theirs. I mean, it was my first Byrds album. I probably wouldn't recommend it be most people's first Byrds album, but like I said, I already had a greatest hits before going into this, so